It was a case that sounded like it was made on the Hollywood screens.
Tell me what happened.
True crime watchers have been on the edge of their seats, captivated by a new docuseries which describes the harrowing kidnapping of Denise Huskins. In 2015, Denise was kidnapped by an intruder who took her while she was staying with her boyfriend, Quinn. Aaron called 911 hours after Denise was kidnapped. Once he was brought in for questioning, he described what police thought was a colorful tale. Aaron told police he and Denise were awakened in the middle of the night by armed intruders. They were bound by zip ties, blinded by blackout swim goggles, and then the intruders kidnapped his girlfriend. The problem is, no one believed his story. Vallejo police questioned Aaron for 18 hours. And during his police interview, he was pressured by lead detective Matthew Muster to confess to the crime, often suggesting Aaron killed Denise and disposed of her body. Then, in a shocking twist for police, Denise reappeared 2 days later outside of her father's home, hours away, seemingly unharmed. Denise's return home should have been a joyous moment. Instead, police believe she and Aaron concocted the whole story, making the comparison to the 2014 box office hit Gone Girl.
When I first heard about the story, I understand that it was sort of on the heels of the movie and the book Gone Girl, which is what they call this. But when everything first broke and the news broke that she had been kidnapped, I don't think that my mind initially went to this being a hoax. Um, yes, was the story a bit fantastical? Yes, but I just assumed that a normal course of an investigation was going to take place and that we would eventually have an answer.
Tracy Walder is a former CIA and FBI agent. Although she didn't work on the Denise Huskins case, she notes some failures within the Vallejo Police Department's investigation.
Look, I have watched some of his police interrogations as well as also listened to his 911 call, listened to Quinn's 911 call. And I have to be honest with you. Yes, it sounds a bit off. But the thing is as a law enforcement officer, what I perceive and what I think doesn't matter. It's what the evidence tells me. Because the reality is everyone reacts differently. And I have to say, the minute that he said he had been drugged, that he saw him being drugged, there should have been a toxicology test done immediately, because then that would have proven or disproven initially some of his claims, and quite frankly, really set up whether or not he was a credible person, if he was lying about that or not. And they failed to do any of that. And so when I heard right off the bat, I mean, one of the first things that he said was that he had been drugged, and they never did a toxicology report. That was very disturbing to me.
Another disturbing detail: while Vallejo police at the time were under the assumption Denise faked her kidnapping, she went through what some would describe as hell. Denise said she was taken to a remote location. One of the men she interacted with told her he was ex-military and part of a criminal group with other members. But the kidnapper also said she was never the intended target. Instead, it was her boyfriend's ex-fiancée, Andrea Roberts. Denise was held captive, drugged, and raped twice by her kidnapper. While Aaron was detained by police for questioning, the kidnapper reportedly tried to contact him both by email and phone about a ransom. However, those calls and emails would go on unanswered because police had put his phone on airplane mode.
I mean, I'll be very honest. I have never taken someone's cell phone and put it on airplane mode. For me, and this is going to sound terrible, but if they're willing to give me their cell phone, I'm going to keep it on so I can see any texts that are coming through. So it's very normal to not allow them to have their cell phones in interrogations because you want it to just be them and you having a conversation. But it's very abnormal to put that on airplane mode, specifically because if someone has just been arrested or someone has just come in, to be interviewed, a lot of times you're getting these kind of fresh texts and fresh information that can help give you more evidence. So that was very strange to me. I also think, this is 2015. We did have the ability to look through people's cell phones, see where towers were pinging, look through those text messages. So phone companies should have been subpoenaed at that point, particularly when you have someone who was still missing.
When Denise was ultimately released, she didn't immediately go to police, which we later learned was due to threats made to her family by the kidnapper.
That is a very long drive that he took in that white Mustang. So it is very odd. And again, I can understand where police were hesitant at embracing their story with open arms. But again, it doesn't mean that you don't look at the evidence, which, in my opinion, this was just a complete disregard of any evidence that was put in front of them. So, yes, of course, her story is odd. I mean, we had a case recently, actually, up in Northern California, of an individual making her own hoax, right? And then appearing in Costa Mesa, California, which is 8 or 9 hours away. So that was a hoax. And I understand where some of this comes from, but we can't just assume everything is a hoax. I think with Denise, in my opinion, she had been severely emotionally and sexually traumatized. Clearly, we know that now. And I think she truly wanted to protect her family and felt that if she talked to police, that they would be harmed. I feel she believed that. Now, I understand what public perception is of that, right? If you've been kidnapped, you want to come forward because you want them to be caught. But the public at that time didn't necessarily know the details of what had transpired, and really neither did police.
Vallejo PD publicly slammed the couple, and in one press conference even saying the two wasted police resources and owed the community an apology. But it turns out they weren't lying, and a real person was behind the terrifying ordeal. Months after Denise returned home and was subjected to false accusations of her kidnapping being called a hoax, an attempted kidnapping just 40 miles south of Vallejo would prompt a break in the case. In June 2015, an intruder broke into a home similarly to Aaron and Denise's story, but this time the perpetrator left a clue, a cell phone that dropped inside the home during the scuffle. Dublin police traced the phone to a woman who told them that phone belonged to her son, a former Marine and Harvard law graduate named Matthew Mueller. Mueller was tracked down, eventually arrested and charged, and ultimately sentenced to prison for 40 years. But questions still linger about the case to this day, including why did the kidnapper say Aaron's ex-fiance was the intended target? But the biggest question remains, why did police and the media not believe Denise and Aaron's story?
Now, I think for police to have the tunnel vision that they had is very negligent, quite frankly, on their part. I will say that. I feel that that was very negligent. It's okay to develop theories of how crimes occurred. I did that all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't develop a theory and then become so closed off to where the evidence leads you. And in this case, they didn't even process evidence. They didn't even test evidence. And that to me is criminally negligent. I think the biggest lesson that they can take away from this case is not to have tunnel vision to the point that it excludes all other logic that is being presented to you. I think that's really the biggest takeaway.
As for Aaron and Denise today, the traumatic saga brought the two closer together. They got married in 2018 and are now parents to 2 children. Denise and Aaron have maintained there was more than one suspect involved. However, no one but Mueller has ever been charged. In 2016, the couple filed a defamation lawsuit against the city of Vallejo and its police department. They settled out of court for $2.5 million. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.